In the waters of baptism, Christ calls us to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. Peace Lutheran Church, for its history, has been working to equip disciples of Jesus Christ for mission and ministry. Today, I'd like to take you on a journey to where we began on Sanibel Island in an attempt in the 1970s and 90s to plant a church, and then over in the middle 1990s at a Jewish temple and a Masonic temple where God worked to plant us to where in 2005 we became a part of this present location. Come and listen to the stories of our history. In the late 1970s, there was an attempt to plant a Lutheran church on Sanibel Island. Despite lots of hard work, that attempt did not realize its dreams, and the mission was closed. And then in 1992, the Lutheran Church of the Isles was planted. It was an attempt to form a congregation on Sanibel. Many of the people who were a part of that effort are no longer with us, but one of them, Ray Vold, is able to speak with us today. Let's meet Ray.
Rachel and I had a place at Castlebell Timeshare, and then we bought a home at Kelly Green's in 1990. Looked for a Lutheran church. There wasn't any in the area. Then we heard about a church here on the island, meeting at the Congregational Church of the Isles. The ELC had taken over from a previous Missouri Synod, and we attended Saturday evenings, 5 p.m. Different pastors came. It was a wonderful worship experience, and we enjoyed it, the Lutheran liturgy compared to the non-denominational church. Then it folded up. Pastor Jordy was our last pastor. A group of people met, said disbanded it. It was some disharmony about that. I wrote to the bishop, or I wrote to Dick Hafer, because Pastor Jordy suggested that I do that. He was not at the meeting when they closed up the church, but it got closed. So then we left, and later on, of course, rejoined on the other side of the causeway when it became Peace. And I think Peace was an appropriate name at that time.
One of the funny stories from the Lutheran Church of the Isles occurred when there was a major celebration. As the service time drew closer, they couldn't find the pastor. Suddenly they heard a sound from a downstairs bathroom. Pastor Sutter was yelling that he couldn't get out of the bathroom. Folks went down and found out that they ended up having to dismantle the door. It was a funny story, and people kept telling that story for many years after their time here at the Lutheran Church of the Isles. In 1995, Pastor Dick Hafer from Christ Lutheran Church in Cape Coral planted a new vision in the hearts of people, to be able to gather for worship in South Fort Myers. Temple Bethel was able to host this group every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. I'd like you to hear the story of someone who attended the first worship service.
Okay, I went down to the bulletin board at our condo, and I saw a statement saying that Lutheran Church was going to meet at Temple. So I called the number, and when I found out it was Christ, I knew it was going to be an ELCA. So I went the very first Sunday. My sister and brother-in-law were here, the three of us went. There were 28 people. Marge Brooks sang a beautiful solo. Mary Kent played the organ. Pastor Hafer was the presiding minister. And it was just a lovely experience. But then we were told we had to leave immediately and take the cross, the hymnals, and everything out because the Jewish youth was coming to use the facilities on Sunday. So we did that. And then I went to Pastor Hafer and I said, I want to join this church, all excited. And he said, Marion, it's going to be a long time before there's going to be a church that you can join. But he said, in the meantime, you can join Christ in Cape Coral. So seeing that Joyce was my sponsor, and she lived in the complex where I do, and so the two of us went to church at Cape Coral. And that was the very beginning.
In 1995, leaders of the mission were able to locate a facility, the Fort Myers Beach Masonic Lodge on Pine Ridge Road in South Fort Myers, that they could utilize for worship and for meetings. Let's go inside and meet some of the people who will share the stories from that time.
It was a wonderful experience to be pastor here. It happened that I retired in 1995, and came to Florida to retire. And one of our former members from New Jersey was attending a small mission by the name of Peace and invited us. We were invited to attend worship. And we attended for the full year. And there averaged about 18 to 20 to 22 people, the usual suspects, week after week. And when the pastor who was serving here decided he would not return, the congregation asked me to take over, which I did. The next fall, we came back and we had the usual 18 to 20 or so suspects. But a funny thing happened after about 5 or 6 weeks. Around that 6th week, I walked out into the room to conduct worship, and there were about 40 people here. And my first reaction was, is it Easter? But the next week, there were that number of people again. And I knew that God was doing something here. And the numbers continued to grow to the point that at the end of the 3 years, on a good Sunday, we would have 70, sometimes 80, and even a few times 90 people attending worship. So we knew that when it was time for the church at large to send a pastor, that there would be a good beginning. One of the things that I take pride in as far as the congregation is concerned is that everything that was done here was done without a nickel of mission support from the greater church. The congregation paid its own way, and indeed, instead of being simply a mission congregation, became a congregation with a mission in that time. We did have help from Christ Lutheran Church, which was our sponsoring congregation. They provided some office space for me, they did the bulletins, and they took care of all of the finances and the bookkeeping. But other than that, everything was done here and self-supporting, and indeed mission support to others. The other thing that I think about as far as this congregation is concerned is the people. There are terrific people in this congregation. If you came as a visitor one Sunday, it was your own fault if you left as a visitor, because usually there were no strangers. We had some people here who could talk the paint off the walls, and usually did. And our fellowship times were absolutely wonderful, elaborate at times, as a matter of fact. I can remember one Sunday when I walked into the fellowship hall, and all the Green Bay Packer fans had decided that they'd make it a Green Bay Packer Sunday. There were green and gold streamers around the room. The cakes were iced in gold and green, and the server was wearing a cheese head. The people were terrific about that, and also terrific in terms of the way in which they served in the congregation. Even the smallest, most menial task they were willing to do. And that goes from people who had what I guess you would call everyday jobs, right up to one individual who was the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Nothing was too small for them to do and to take on. So that was another wonderful aspect of this. So those are some of the experiences that I had here at Peace. I could go on for a long time, but I hope that gives some flavor of the beginnings of this place and my feelings about it.
In June 1999, I was appointed to serve as a pastor-developer of Peace Lutheran Church, serving South Fort Myers and Sanibel Island. My wife Elizabeth, Frances, Carol, and I traveled from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to Fort Myers. We were welcomed into the mission by John Kent and the Assembly. We would build on the strong foundation that had been built for peace. The first Eucharist where I served as a presiding minister was October 10th, 1999. Acts chapter 2, verse 42 would serve as a model for planning this new congregation. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. As the body of Christ, we would worship, study, pray, and serve our sisters and brothers. Now that we were a mission congregation in development, the ELCA, Florida Bahamas Synod, mission partners, and the faithful of the congregation would combine their time, talent, and treasures to plant a strong congregation. One of the first things that happened is that I was commissioned as the pastor developer. Many pastors and people attended that celebration. As a mission congregation, we would have a very ambitious stewardship challenge. Each step of the way, God raised us from how can we do this to look at what God can do as the gifts are gathered. Planting a mission means that the Spirit blossoms of gift of faith in our midst. God led us to a wonderful partnership with Lee Hospital to add a parish nurse to our staff. A grant from the Blue Foundation allowed Karen Duff to work in our church and Brightest Horizon Daycare.
Well, I have fond memories of 2004 when I became a full-time member, and we had a fellowship after church. Everyone moved from the service right into the fellowship hall, and Everett Rood was in the kitchen and had set up all the pastries and the most important thing, the coffee. So people filed in, and I remember Karen Duff, the parish nurse, always wanted to have a healthy alternative to the pastries. So we had cheese and fruit. When everybody was settled down, then Alan Lindsay got up and told jokes. So that started the fellowship. Everyone sat not in a assigned seat, but in the usual seat that they had always sat in Sunday after Sunday. I didn't have an assigned seat because I was new, so I went from table to table and got to meet people and make good friends. After a short time, I joined Everett Rood's team and worked in the kitchen, and we had a lot of fun getting ready for fellowship and doing the cleanup. It was a great time.
Well, I guess what comes to mind first is my involvement in the choir. That was the first time I'd ever been in a choir. So, and it was the twins that got me involved, that heard me one Sunday and said, "You should be in the choir." And I just thought it was a great idea because I thought it was kind of fun. And Pastor Frank was just talking, and he was talking about Mary Kent, who was our choir director and our organist and our piano player, and he was saying that his wife Lois, who was in the choir with us, and Frank was in the choir, and I'm thinking we were like, maybe there were from 10 to 15 people, but Lois said that Mary Kent took a 4-man, an alto, and a soprano and made a choir. I'm sorry, I was afraid this was going to happen. Anyway, there were just a few of us looking at pictures. I was thinking about the robes that I think were given to us, I think from Cape Coral, from Christ Church. And we had to get up and move. We had to move over to the center, and I remember standing on steps, and then we had to move the piano, and all because, you know, we were in this place that it was our church, but it wasn't our home quite yet. And it was so nice to be involved and to feel a part of. And Mary was she was so good with me because I really didn't have a whole lot of musical knowledge based on the rest of the people that were in choir. And she was just so, what's the word? Not forgiving, but accepting of my dumb questions, I think. And it's just, you know, it's lovely to be able to look back and remember the people that helped form this whole group, and you know, are no longer here with us. So when we first talked about this, that we were going to have remembrances, and my first remembrance, my very first thought was that I remember Beulah Schleimer, who is now 97, hope she doesn't get upset that I said that, Beulah and Freddie. And Freddie was frail even at that time, and I think they used to sit over there. And Beulah would get up for communion. She'd grab Freddie by the belt, and he'd get on the chair, and he'd get up, and she'd walk him up to communion, holding on to that belt all the while, because he didn't want anybody to have to come over and bring him communion. He was going to walk. That's what I remember.
What I recall about the Masonic Lodge is that it was a very suitable place for a mission congregation. It was both respectful and reverent, and the nice royal blue soft chairs were comfortable. My first Sunday there, Ernie Pyle came in, folded up his long legs, and sat next to me. That was the worship part, and then there was a fellowship hall too, which was a lot less formal, with folding tables and folding chairs, but it was welcoming too. And I recall one occasion where Pastor George Frank was leading a book discussion on the Da Vinci Code, and it was just a warm feeling to be there with 8 or a dozen folks and enjoy our church.
We were in a group that was meeting at Habitat and enjoying it so much. I mean, we couldn't wait till Wednesday came along so we could go. And we got thinking at Rod Hendrickson was one of the people in the group, and we got talking one day that this would be something that maybe Peace would be interested in getting involved in a little bit. And we were surprised that Eva that signed up, a lot of people have signed up right away, they wanted to be a part of it too, and we had such good get-togethers. And then we'd stop for lunch afterwards and hash it all over. But it was so nice to be encouraging these people that it's a hand out, not a hand up, not a hand out. You know, that always made us feel good. And one time, one of the couple, it was a woman with 2 little children, gave up her house. And Habitat took it back. You couldn't sell the house until it was paid for, but she gave up and gave up the house, and they had just ruined it. So Habitat took it back and asked Rod and us if we would like to be responsible for it. So we went in and took out the carpeting that had to be taken out, and we redid the walls and all the damage that had been done and cleaned it all up. And Pastor Walter even came and painted with us. And we had a great time, and it just gives you such a good feeling as a group, such a mixed group that we had, that they were interested in the same things and doing the same things that we enjoyed doing. And we had a lot of fun with other things too. I remember one Easter we had the girls, Pastor Walter's girls over, and some other little children that were visiting, and we dyed Easter eggs for everybody that was coming to church the following Sunday. And I remember were we cooking enough? Did we have enough? How many people would be there? We had no idea. But we did a lot of them, and I know Dick and I had eggs for about a week afterwards, every way you could think of, you know. But just enjoyed doing things like that too. And the coffee hour at church was always so special, and it was a different feeling of going to church. We couldn't wait to get there sometimes and get involved in what was going on. You know, it was just a really fun thing to get started here.
The Spirit moved us forward with plans for the organization of a new congregation in the fall of 2002. Ray Vold, Pat Nodell, and Betty Lou Pyle were leaders of that venture. In December 2002, we began the signing of the charter of the congregation. John and Mary Kent, who were key leaders, were the first to sign the charter. The charter was signed by 178 people, reflecting the vitality of the mission. On Sunday, January 19, 2003, we gathered at Faith United Methodist Church to celebrate the organization of our new congregation. It was an opportunity to express appreciation for the many people whom God used to plant our church. It was truly the body of Christ led by the crucified and risen Lord. As we were being blessed by many gifts, we had helped to plant a new church. We selected Cross of Glory in Derby, Kansas, where Ken and Shirley Cardwell were members. That congregation used our gifts for the kitchen in their new church. George Brooks worked with me to find a suitable location for Peace Lutheran Church. The Mission Investment Fund purchased 5.2 acres of land on McGregor Boulevard for $270,000 for our future use. The site was in a growing area of Fort Myers, close to Sanibel, and on a major road. It was covered with brush. A crew from the church worked to clean an area for worship. It was so exciting to dream on this new place. It was projected that we would pay for the site in 3 years, but it was accomplished in 18 months. Jim Shanley, many others, and I enjoyed that burning of the mortgage. The groundbreaking for the new church was an exciting celebration for our congregation. Construction was delayed for a month as Hurricane Charlie had pummeled the area on August 13, 2004. Soon the dozers were working, the site was cleared. It was fun to watch the building. We were able to visit the site for fellowship and envision what would develop in this place. Pastor Bruce Carlson, a retired pastor, served part-time in ministry development. The contractor planned for the building to be ready by Palm Sunday 2005. Our Bishop Ed Benaway was scheduled. We learned that the building would not be ready for Palm Sunday. No windows, air conditioning, bathrooms, or even a coffee maker. Well, we decided to use the space as it was anyway. Chairs and a porta-john were ordered. Mary Kent led the choir with a portable keyboard. It was a fabulous celebration. The church was packed with over 400 people. The palms somehow had not been ordered. Father Joe at St. Columkill was more than happy to give us some palms. Coffee and donuts on that Sunday were served on stacks of plywood in the narthex. Once again on Easter Sunday, we used the church, and it was packed once again with God's people.
Well, Darlene, my wife, and I came from large congregations, Lutheran congregations up in Minneapolis. And we came down here and started visiting and decided we wanted to become members of Peace. And so we invited Pastor Walter to come over to our house to visit one day. And he walked in the door and he had 4 shopping bags full of papers and records and notes and whatever all. P.S. That's all translated into this wonderful building that we have here. I recall so well that one of the exciting times was when we had the people come over here from, we were still worshiping in the Masonic Hall, and came over here to have coffee. We didn't have windows, we didn't have doors, we were wide open, but everybody was so excited. It was an exciting time, and I know we're going to do that again. It was very memorable for both Darlene and I.
As a deacon, it's been an exciting journey. Pastor and I met for, I guess, about a year after I came through the diaconia program and tried to discern, study, discuss, and finally decided that I should take place in worship as part of my deacon duties here. And that has been a great experience for me. One of the great experiences has been to work on the 3 days of Easter, Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, and Easter Vigil. With Rick and Pastor's help, we have honed and made a very wonderful 3-day service at the Easter time. And in fact, we've been blessed the last couple years to have the bishop come down for our Easter Vigil service. So it's been my honor also to help out with the assisting ministers, the gospel procession folks, and to participate in forming the prayers each week for service. Peace Lutheran is a wonderful church. I know many of the people that I've talked to come here because of the worship service and because of the fellowship. I think mostly because of the fellowship to start with, though. This is a warm, welcoming church who take to heart the message that God gives us.
I love Peace. The first Sunday I came here,
it was over at the lodge, and I met George and Margie, and Margie and I got to be real good friends. And by the second Sunday, I said, I think the ladies should sew. And she said, really? The pastor's wife suggested that too. And so she said, what should we sew? And I said, we should sew quilts. And that's what we do. We sew quilts. In the beginning, we begged for fabric, and we cut up clothes and everything to make our quilts. The first year, we sent about 50 quilts, and from then on, we've sent at least 200 every year. And they're very much appreciated throughout the world. So it's a wonderful organization. The ladies are so faithful, and we have a wonderful fellowship. We sew all year long, so it's a worthwhile project.
The first time that Johnny and I came to Peace, there was fellowship after the service. And you really got to meet all the people in Peace that were so friendly, which, of course, being new to the community from a different state really made a difference. And we've made lifelong friends here. It just happened that all of a sudden, I got into the fellowship of the other activities for that, which was picnics, funerals, welcome back dinners, anything that we needed done to organize and fulfill and finish up, clean up after a fellowship situation here at Peace. Every Sunday after church, we always had a fellowship. And then the other ones kind of expanded as the church grew. And then if something happened, we could have maybe only one a month for the other fellowships, or we could have 7 in a 10-day span, which gets to be a challenge, but it always turns out, with God's help, the way it should. So it's very fulfilling.
January 19th, 2013 was the 10th anniversary of our congregation. Marge McCoy chaired the tremendous team that developed an outstanding anniversary celebration. A banquet was held at the Crown Plaza at Bell Tower. Cale Thompson served as the master of ceremony. The banquet was a wonderful opportunity to share the stories of Christ's work in our midst. A festival Eucharist was celebrated for the 10th anniversary the next day. A choral anthem was written for the anniversary. Christ nurtured the assembly as we gathered around the Word and Sacrament. A legacy fund was established in the anniversary year through the leadership of Mike and Marge McCoy, David and Pat Miller, Dick Unger, Bill Kick, and others. Many people have shared gifts with the Legacy Fund. Those gifts will grow and will be used to help start new ministries or mission. The Legacy Fund was first used to have Pastor Mick and Judy Roschke from Milwaukee serve as the snowbird pastor during high season.
Well, we came to this church in 2010 at Christmas time. It was the first time we attended the church. Found it to be a warm and loving place, and so we joined the church. And in 2012, I believe it was, I became a member of the council. And upon becoming a member of the council, a gentleman called Dave Miller said, well, why don't you take over the Mutual Ministry Committee, which is part of the council? And he says, it's a piece of cake. And what I didn't know is we were starting a strategic plan of the church to determine the future direction the church would go. And one of the important things of that was that the Mutual Ministry Committee deals with the personnel. And the strategic plan very clearly said we did not have enough personnel in the church to account for a congregation of our size, so it became our duty to rewrite the entire structure of the administrative structure of the staffing of the church. And that was thanks to Dave Miller, supposedly the piece of cake. It's turned out that we did come up with a strategic plan for the restructuring of the staff, and we have implemented it as we said here today, and it is working well. But it hasn't been easy at times, but it's been a lot of fun and it's been exciting. And I was glad to be part of it.
Well, my wife Sandy and I moved here in 2003. We arrived Christmas Day of 2003. Shortly thereafter, we joined Peace, and not long after that, I became more and more involved each time I arrived. And during the construction of this building and our first 10 years, there was so many things happening, and as we were celebrating our 10th anniversary, I said to Pastor Walter, I says, well, what do you suppose the next 10 years has in store for us? So we did a survey of our congregation, and overwhelming support came out that we needed to add into our building. So we did a capital campaign. We received $1.3 million in pledges in no time at all, and we started building, and turned out 1.3 wasn't going to be enough, so we went back to the congregation and said, hey, you know, we probably need some more. What do you think? Shall we stick with this or go for it? And they overwhelmingly said, go for it. So just an example of the support that this congregation has given to everyone, along with their warm and welcoming attitude.
Twice in 2014 and 2015, a large tent was erected on the site of the future fellowship hall. A great picnic lunch was prepared and served. Easter Sunday 2016 was a day filled with resurrection faith. The church was overflowing with people seated in the narthex and parking lot. Over 1,300 people worshiped at Peace that weekend. Following the Easter Eucharist, we gathered for groundbreaking. A cross was traced into the site of the fellowship hall. The many people who had helped with the project shoveled earth. Our expansion would allow our wonderful ministry to grow. For additional space for the staff, a music room, a library, a narthex for hospitality, more parking and fellowship for our growing small groups, parish nurse programs, and servant ministry within the church and with the community. As we heard in the Easter Eucharist, Christ has gone before us every step in the ministry and mission of planting Peace Lutheran Church. You have heard the many exciting faith-filled stories of the planting of Peace Lutheran Church. We're very excited to share our history, and it's even more exciting to see what God is doing with us as we move into the future. Look at the construction project with the men working and the sound of construction as we move forward in this 2016 Faith, Family, and Future Building Project. When you walk into the church, you'll be walking over people who've given us their blessing to this project. And I hope their blessing will touch your life. God is still working with us. And I want you to know that this is Christ Church, and there is a place here for you.